Hello.
Bună dimineața.
Bună dimineața. Thank you for accepting to talk to Mediafax
I'm
today.
very happy to be with you.
We're going to start with the first question.
Okay.
So the U.S. opposed the ban on international adoptions in Romania since we first talked about this in 2001. How do you explain the interest of the U.S. in adoptions from Romania?
Thank you very much for that question. I think that many Americans are interested in adoption from all over the world. In fact, in the last 20 years, Americans have adopted about 250,000 children from various countries. And Romania is one of the countries that Americans used to adopt from, and I think they would be interested in doing so again.
Romania partially reopened the international adoptions about last year, from 2012,
Yes.
maybe a beginning. On the other hand, the number of institutionalized children in Romania have dropped since like 10 years or 15 years ago. What do you think would change for Romanian children if that are right now in a form of special protection, if there would be a total reopening of international adoptions?
The problem is that there are those 500 children, and there are very few families who can meet the criteria for intercountry adoption. So that means you're leaving a lot of children in an institution who could otherwise find a permanent, loving family.
What do you think Romania should do in this direction?
I think that Romania has come very far in the time that I lived here. I was here from 1995 to 1997. I think Romania has put very good laws in place, very good procedures in place to protect children, but in almost every country there are going to be children who cannot find a home in their own country. And I think it would make sense to use the same strict criteria to find a family internationally that you do here in Romania. And that would enable those children to live in families.
The main reason in Romania why children are abandoned is poverty. Do you think if we would open the international adoption, this would be in the detrimental of the efforts to support the family to be able to raise their own babies?
I think it is very important for governments to support families. I think that children do best in their own families, and I think that every government has a responsibility to its citizens to protect children and their families. But as I said, sometimes it just isn't possible. Sometimes the parents die, there are no living relatives, and studies have found that children who live in institutions do not develop the same way that children who live in families do. And so it's really important for governments to help children find families. And that's what it's about. It's taking a child and finding the best family for that child so that they live in a permanent, loving family.
Officially, Romania has decided to ban international adoptions to avoid child abuse back in 2000. Do you think that there existed any other reasons why they made this decision back then?
I think there
why?
are probably a lot of reasons why countries make these decisions. I think part of it is they believe that there is abuse in the system, but Romania has really strengthened its system and put in a lot of child protection measures that will protect children and keep them safe. And they can regulate intercountry adoption so that and we would work with them on this to find the best possible homes for the children. So I think that it can always be a concern that a child will be abused, but right now we in the United States, before we allow parents to adopt, we do a very thorough study of the parents. Their home is looked at, their background is looked at, and only then are they given permission to adopt a child from overseas.
Since we partially opened the international adoptions back in 2012, there were only few adoptions made abroad for international families. Do you think that Romania, or what solution would we have to monitor the children that would be raised in other countries than Romania?
That's a great question. So, the way the United States does adoptions is through adoption service providers, agencies. Romania would have to accredit them to work in Romania, and Romania can set all the rules for them. So that means if they want certain reports on the children after the adoption has been completed, they put that into the requirement. The agency has to fulfill that requirement, and if they don't, Romania can tell them you can't work here anymore.
So this should be...
Right, so every agency now in the United States is a Hague accredited agency, which means that it meets the standards of the Hague Convention. Romania and the United States are partners in Hague, and it sets out all the rules and regulations for doing intercountry adoption. But every country has the right to regulate its own process. And so if Romania were to further open up intercountry adoptions, they can say you have to do this, 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 and this, and if they don't do it, they're done.
There have been reports that the U.S. has not abolished visas for Romanian citizens because the Romanian authorities have banned international adoptions. U.S. could become more flexible about Romanians if international adoption would be reopened in Romania?
No. The two issues are not linked. One is about national security, and the other is about the well-being and permanency for children. So it's two very, very different things. I think the United States wants nothing but the best for Romania. We want Romania to be prosperous. We want it to be secure. And we want all the children in Romania to find permanent, loving families.
What advice would you have for Romania regarding the legislation for international adoption? What could we do in the near future that would change the fate of the children?
I think it would be, I think it's reasonable to open up adoptions to children that have a hard time finding permanency. And those are children with special needs, older children, and members of sibling groups. And if the process was opened up for those children, I think it could do a lot of good. Those children would get out of institutions, and they would have a greater opportunity for a secure, prosperous, loving life.
There were voices that said that the legislation for international adoption in Romania is really difficult, and many families that have tried to adopt a child from Romania gave up on the process. What would be your advice?
In our discussions with government officials, they have made some proposals that will make the process more efficient and faster. And I think that will be very helpful. I think that it's really important that children get moved out of institutions as quickly as possible. There was a conference here 2 weeks ago on the well-being of children, and the co-authors of the Bucharest Early Intervention Study were all here. And this is a study that has tracked children for the last 16 years who have lived in an institution, and then tracked children who live in families. And the differences in their brain development is amazing. And it shows that children who are raised in institutions do not develop at the same rate. They are stunted. Their intellectual growth and their emotional growth is far less than if they were raised in a family. The key word is family. Children belong in families, and the best way to get them there has to be decided by each individual country. But generally, it's moving them quickly out of institutions. It's working with the families. It's intervening with the families to help them support their children. and if they can't, finding another family for that child.
There were some discussion about 2001 when Romania has decided to close international adoptions, that there were some pressures regarding for Romania to join the European Union, that this must be something that Romania does.
I've heard the same thing.
Why do you think that happened?
I think there were voices in the EU that were opposed to intercountry adoption. But I know that there are countries in the EU that do adoptions. I mean, some of Romania's neighbors. I think it's an individual issue, and I think that every country, no matter, what union or pact they're a part of, has to make decisions that are in the best interests of their children. I mean, that's what The Hague is all about. It's how do we respect the best interests of the child, and the best interest of the child is to be raised in a family.
Correct. Thank you very much.
You're very
This was
welcome.
nice.
Thank you.